In the heart of Venice's moonlit canals, a shadowy assassin vanishes into the masquerade, leaving behind a trail of whispers and a stolen gem that could unravel empires. Welcome to the Sapphire Mask, a carnival of shadows, a Hercule Poirot mystery where deception dances with danger. Grab a cup of tea, take a seat, and let the intrigue unfold. If you're hooked, hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Chapter 1. The arrival in Venice. As the gondola sliced through the misty waters of the Grand Canal, Hercule Poirot adjusted his impeccable moustache, his grey eyes scanning the opulent facades of the palazzos that lined the shore. It was February 1928, the height of Carnival season, when Venice transformed into a whirlwind of masks, music and mystery. Poirot had been summoned by an urgent telegram from his old friend, Contessa Isabella Rossi, a wealthy widow whose family heirloom, a legendary sapphire necklace known as the Mask of Eternity, had vanished under inexplicable circumstances. Mon ami, Poirot murmured to himself, the little grey cells, they are already at work. The story begins with Poirot stepping off the gondola onto the bustling Piazza San Marco, where revellers in elaborate costumes swirled like confetti in the wind. Feathered masks hid faces, silk capes billowed, and the air hummed with laughter and the distant strum of mandolins. But beneath the festivities lurked tension. The Contessa's palazzo, a grand edifice of marble and gold, stood nearby, its windows flickering with candlelight. Poirot was greeted at the door by the Contessa herself, a striking woman in her 50s with raven hair and eyes like polished onyx. "Monsieur Poirot, thank heaven you've come," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. "The sapphire was stolen right from my neck during last night's ball, yet no one saw a thing." Poirot nodded sympathetically, his mind racing through possibilities. He requested a tour of the crime scene, the grand ballroom where the theft occurred. The room was a masterpiece of Venetian splendor, with crystal chandeliers casting rainbows on frescoed walls depicting ancient myths. The Contessa explained how she'd worn the necklace, a stunning piece featuring a central sapphire the size of a pigeon's egg, said to bring fortune to its wearer but cursed to thieves. During a masked waltz, she'd felt a brief tug at her throat, and poof, the gem was gone. No alarms, no witnesses, only a sea of anonymous faces. To illustrate the cunning of the crime, consider this. In a crowd of hundreds, anyone could be the culprit. Poirot began his methodical inquiry, starting with the guests. There was the dashing American industrialist, Harlan Thorpe, whose fortune rivaled the Contessa's, the enigmatic Russian ballerina, Nadia Petrova, with a mysterious past, and the local art dealer, Giovanni Luca, rumoured to traffic in black market jewels. Poirot advised the Contessa to secure her remaining valuables. Practical tip. In such chaos, always note the exits and allies. Order method, he insisted. These are the keys to unravelling the web. As Poirot examined a stray feather left on the ballroom floor, a potential clue, shadows lengthened outside, hinting at deeper secrets. The carnival's allure masked darker intents, setting the stage for revelations to come. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Masquerade. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the Contessa's grand ballroom, the echo of last night's revelry still lingering in the air. The Venetian morning poured soft light through tall windows, illuminating the polished marble floor where the sapphire necklace had vanished. Poirot's sharp eyes darted to the stray feather he'd found, a delicate plume, dyed midnight blue, now tucked safely in his pocket. It was a whisper of intent, a breadcrumb in a city of disguises. He turned to the Contessa, who hovered nearby, her hands twisting a silk handkerchief. "Madame," he said, his voice calm but firm, "we must now speak with those who danced closest to you during the waltz. The truth, it hides in their words." The Contessa led Poirot to a private salon, its walls adorned with gilded mirrors reflecting the morning haze. Here she'd gathered the three most prominent guests from the ball: Harlan Thorpe, the American industrialist; Nadia Petrova, the Russian ballerina; and Giovanni Luca, the Venetian art dealer. Each sat in a velvet chair, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking softly as he studied their faces. Masks were off now, but deception, he knew, could wear many forms. Harlan Thorpe leaned back, his broad shoulders filling the chair. A man in his 40s, with a jaw like granite and eyes that glinted with ambition. He spoke first. "Monsieur Poirot, I was dancing with my wife, Clara, when the theft happened. We were across the room, nowhere near the Contessa." His voice carried the confidence of a man used to commanding boardrooms, but Poirot noted a slight twitch in his left hand. A tell, perhaps. Clara, a petite woman with a pearl choker, nodded vigorously, her curls bouncing. "We were admiring the chandeliers," she added, a touch too quickly. Nadia Petrova sat poised, her dancer's grace evident even in stillness. Her pale blonde hair was swept into a chignon, and her emerald eyes met Poirot's without flinching. "I danced with many partners," she said, her Russian accent soft but deliberate. The ballroom was a whirlwind, masks, costumes, chaos. "I saw nothing unusual." Yet her fingers traced the edge of her sleeve, where a faint tear in the silk caught Poirot's eye. A struggle, or merely a wardrobe mishap in the crowded dance? Giovanni Luca, the art dealer, was the last to speak. A wiry man with a sharp nose and a velvet coat, he exuded the charm of a seasoned salesman. "I deal in paintings, not jewels," he said, spreading his hands. "I was negotiating a sale with a Dutch collector near the balcony. Ask him, he'll confirm." But Poirot noticed Luca's gaze flicker toward the door, as if measuring the distance to freedom. The little grey cells hummed. Something was amiss. Poirot began his questioning with precision, weaving between the trio like a fencer probing for weakness. To Thorpe, he asked about the Sapphire's rumoured curse. "Superstition," Thorpe scoffed. "But a gem like that, worth a fortune. Plenty would kill for it." To Nadia, he inquired about the tear in her sleeve. She blushed, claiming a clumsy partner had stepped on her gown. To Luca, he pressed about the Dutch collector, whose name Luca fumbled before recovering. Each answer was a thread, and Poirot was knitting a tapestry of motives. The salon's heavy curtains stirred as a servant entered, carrying a silver tray with a single item, a broken mask, its sapphire-hued sequins glinting faintly. The Contessa gasped. That was worn by a guest last night. A tall figure in a black cloak. Poirot examined it, noting a faint trace of perfume, jasmine, sharp and exotic. "This," he declared, "is no accident. The thief, they leave their signature." The room fell silent, each guest exchanging glances, suspicion thickening the air. As Poirot tucked the mask into his coat, he felt the weight of unseen eyes. The carnival outside roared on, its music drifting through the palazzo's walls. But here, in this gilded cage, the game had begun. The thief was close, perhaps among them, and Poirot's mind churned with possibilities, ready to unravel the next knot in this web of shadows. Chapter 3. The Whisper of Jasmine. Hercule Poirot stood in the Contessa's private salon, the broken mask with its sapphire-hued sequins clutched in his gloved hand. The faint scent of jasmine lingered on it, a clue as elusive as the Venetian mist curling beyond the palazzo's windows. The morning light had shifted, casting long shadows across the room, where Harlan Thorpe, Nadia Petrova, and Giovanni Luca sat, their faces betraying flickers of unease. Poirot's moustache twitched as he paced, his mind dissecting their earlier words like a surgeon with a scalpel. The thief had been bold, stealing the mask of eternity during a crowded waltz, and now this mask, shattered, perfumed, pointed to a calculated mind. The jasmine, Poirot mused aloud. It is not common in Venice this season. We must follow its trail. He turned to the Contessa, who stood by a towering mirror, her reflection pale and drawn. "Madame, this perfume, do you recognize it?" She shook her head, her fingers tightening on her handkerchief. "It's unfamiliar, Monsieur Poirot, but the ball was filled with strangers. Anyone could have worn it." Poirot nodded, his grey eyes narrowing. The jasmine was a signature, a deliberate mark left by someone who wanted to be remembered or feared. He dismissed the guests, instructing them to remain in the palazzo, and requested the Contessa's guest list from the ball. "Every name, every detail," he insisted. "The truth hides in the margins." Poirot retreated to the palazzo's library, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound tomes and portraits of stern-faced Rossi ancestors. The guest list, delivered by a nervous maid, was a roll call of Venice's elite. Nobles, merchants, artists, and a scattering of foreign dignitaries. Poirot's finger traced the names, pausing at a few. A French diplomat who'd left early, a masked nobleman seen near the Contessa during the waltz, and a mysterious woman in a silver gown, noted only as Signora Ignota, the unknown lady. The jasmine scent tugged at his memory. He'd encountered it before, perhaps in Paris or Cairo, but its context eluded him. He stepped onto the library's balcony, overlooking the Grand Canal. Gondolas glided below, their lanterns flickering like fireflies, while masked revelers spilled through the streets, their laughter sharp against the water's lapping. Poirot's gaze settled on a figure across the canal, a tall silhouette in a dark cloak, standing motionless, watching the palazzo. The figure vanished into an alley before Poirot could react, but the chill of recognition lingered. Was this the thief taunting him, or a distraction in this carnival of shadows? Returning to the library, Poirot summoned the palazzo's head butler, Signor Marco, a gaunt man with eyes like polished pebbles. Marco had overseen the ball's preparations and knew every servant's movements. "Tell me," Poirot said, "of the staff who worked the ballroom. Did any act strangely?" Marco hesitated, then admitted a young footman, Paolo, had been absent during the waltz, claiming illness. Poirot's interest piqued. He requested Paolo's presence. The boy, barely 20, arrived trembling, his lanky frame dwarfed by his livery. "I was in the kitchen, signore," Paolo stammered, sick from too much wine. But his eyes darted to the floor, and Poirot noted a faint smudge of blue powder on his cuff. Sequin dust, perhaps. Poirot dismissed Paolo but kept his name in mind, cross-referencing it with the guest list. No connection emerged, yet the boy's nerves suggested more than a hangover. The detective's thoughts returned to the jasmine-scented mask. He sent a telegram to an old contact in Paris, a perfumer named Madame Duval, asking about rare jasmine blends used in high society. "The scent," he murmured. "It is the key to the mask's owner." As evening fell, the Contessa invited Poirot to dine in her private quarters, hoping to ease her nerves. Over plates of risotto and chilled prosecco, she shared rumours of the Sapphire's curse. A 17th century thief who'd stolen it had drowned in the lagoon, his body found clutching the gem. "Superstition, perhaps," she whispered, "but I feel its shadow." Poirot listened, his mind weaving the curse into the puzzle. Was the thief exploiting the legend to sow fear, or did they believe it themselves? The dinner was interrupted by a sharp knock. A servant handed Poirot a note, slipped under the palazzo's gate, a single line, scrawled in elegant script. "The Sapphire sees all." Poirot's pulse quickened. The thief was close, playing a game of cat and mouse. He folded the note, his resolve hardening. The Carnival's masks hid many secrets, but Poirot's little grey cells were relentless, ready to chase the jasmine's whisper through Venice's labyrinth. Chapter 4. The alley's secret. Hercule Poirot clutched the cryptic note. "The Sapphire sees all." Its elegant script burning in his mind as he stood in the Contessa's dining room. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the frescoed walls, and the distant hum of carnival revelry seeped through the windows. The note was no idle jest. It was a challenge, A taunt from a thief bold enough to linger near the crime. Poirot's grey eyes gleamed with determination. "This game," he murmured, slipping the note into his waistcoat. "It requires a hunter as cunning as the prey." He excused himself from the Contessa's table, his polished shoes echoing as he descended the palazzo's grand staircase, intent on tracing the note's origin. Outside, Venice pulsed with life. Masked figures in velvet and lace thronged the narrow cols, their laughter mingling with the clink of glasses and the wail of violins. Poirot navigated the crowd, his compact figure weaving past harlequins and cloaked strangers, his senses attuned to every detail. The note had been slipped under the palazzo's gate, meaning the thief, or their agent, had been mere steps away. He retraced the path to the canal-side entrance, where the gate's iron bars stood cold and unyielding. A faint scuff mark on the cobblestones caught his eye, the imprint of a boot, narrow and pointed, unlike the heavy tread of a gondolier. A lady, perhaps, he mused, or a man with delicate tastes. Poirot followed the calle leading from the gate, a winding alley flanked by shuttered shops and crumbling plaster walls. The air grew heavier, scented with salt and decay, as the festive din faded behind him. At the alley's end, where it met a small bridge over a sluggish canal, he spotted a glint in the moonlight. A single sapphire-hued sequin, identical to those on the broken mask. It lay near a discarded cigarette butt, its tip stained with crimson lipstick. Poirot knelt, carefully collecting both with a handkerchief. The jasmine scent was absent, but the sequin tied this spot to the theft. "The thief passed here," he whispered. "But why linger?" His thoughts were interrupted by a soft rustle behind him. Spinning around, Poirot glimpsed a figure darting into a side passage. A flash of a dark cloak, the same silhouette he'd seen watching the palazzo from across the canal. He gave chase, his cane tapping rhythmically as he navigated the labyrinthine alleys. The figure was swift, melting into shadows, but Poirot's keen eyes caught a torn scrap of fabric snagged on a rusted nail protruding from a wall. It was black silk, edged with silver thread, and carried a faint whiff of jasmine. "Mon Dieu," he breathed, pocketing the clue. The thief was circling, leaving trails like breadcrumbs for a purpose yet unclear. Returning to the palazzo, Poirot sought out the young footman, Paolo, whose nervous demeanour and sequin-dusted cuff had piqued his suspicion. He found the boy in the servants' quarters, polishing silver with trembling hands. "Paolo," Poirot said sharply, "you were not in the kitchens during the waltz, were you?" The boy's face blanched, his eyes darting to the door. I was, signore," he stammered, but Poirot pressed, holding up the cigarette butt. "This was found near the gate. Do you smoke, mon ami?" Paolo shook his head, sweat beading on his brow. "Then explain the sequin dust on your sleeve," Poirot said, his voice like a blade. Paolo crumpled, admitting he'd been bribed to deliver a package to an alley that night, but swore he knew nothing of the sapphire. Poirot dismissed him, unconvinced, but lacking proof. He retired to his guest room, a modest chamber overlooking the canal, and spread his clues on a mahogany desk. The feather, the broken mask, the note, the sequin, the silk scrap, the cigarette butt, each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. The thief's boldness suggested confidence, perhaps familiarity with the palazzo or its guests. Poirot's thoughts drifted to the Signora Ignota from the guest list, the unknown woman in silver. Could she be the cloaked figure, the jasmine's wearer? As midnight tolled, a distant scream pierced the night, sharp and fleeting, from the direction of the canal. Poirot rushed to his window, but the water below was still, reflecting only the moon's pale glow. The scream's echo lingered in his mind, a warning that the Carnival's shadows were growing darker, and the thief was far from finished. Chapter 5. The scream in the night. The scream that shattered the Venetian night lingered in Hercule Poirot's ears, as he stood by his guest room window, the canal below shimmering under a silver moon. It was a cry of fear, raw and fleeting, swallowed by the distant revelry of the carnival. Poirot's heart quickened, his mind racing through possibilities. Was it a reveler's drunken outburst, or something more sinister? A warning tied to the stolen sapphire? He adjusted his silk dressing gown, his fingers brushing the collection of clues on the mahogany desk. The blue feather, the broken sequined mask, the cryptic note, the single sequin, the torn silk scrap, and the lipstick-stained cigarette butt. Each was a thread in the tapestry of deceit, and the scream felt like a needle piercing through. "The game accelerates," he murmured, his grey eyes narrowing. He resolved to investigate the source at once. Poirot slipped into his overcoat, grabbed his cane, and descended the palazzo's spiral staircase, its marble steps cold under his polished shoes. The Contessa's household was asleep, save for a lone footman dozing by the entrance. Poirot stepped into the calle, the night air sharp with the tang of salt and moss. The carnival's pulse throbbed in the distance. Laughter, mandolins, the clink of glasses. But the canal where the scream originated was eerily still. He retraced his steps to the small bridge where he'd found the sequin and cigarette butt, his cane tapping rhythmically on the cobblestones. The moonlight revealed nothing new, only the sluggish ripple of water and the faint creak of moored gondolas. He paused, listening. A soft splash broke the silence, faint but deliberate from a narrow canal branching off the main waterway. Poirot moved swiftly, his compact frame navigating the tight alley with surprising agility. At the canal's edge, he spotted a gondola drifting, its oarsman missing. A glint caught his eye. A silver hairpin, half submerged in the shallow water, its design intricate, etched with a tiny crescent moon. He fished it out with his cane, noting a trace of jasmine perfume clinging to it. "Another mark," he whispered, his mind flashing to the cloaked figure he'd chased earlier. The jasmine linked the hairpin to the broken mask, tightening the web around the elusive thief. Poirot's investigation led him to question the palazzo's gondoliers, who were quartered in a low building by the water. The head gondolier, a grizzled man named Enzo with a scar across his cheek, confirmed that one of their boats had been taken that night without permission. "It was back by dawn, signore," Enzo said, his voice gruff. "No damage, but the oars were wet." Poirot pressed him about passengers during the ball, particularly any cloaked figures or women in silver gowns. Enzo scratched his beard, recalling a late-night fare. A tall woman, face hidden by a hood, who'd paid in gold coins to be rowed to a distant quay near the Rialto. "She smelled of flowers," he added, "sharp, like jasmine." The clue sent Poirot's thoughts spiralling. The Signora Ignota from the guest list, the unknown woman in silver, was emerging as a spectre at the heart of the mystery. He returned to the palazzo and requested the Contessa's assistance in identifying her. In the morning room, bathed in pale sunlight, the Contessa pored over her invitations, her brow furrowed. "I don't recall inviting such a woman," she admitted. "But the ball was open to trusted acquaintances. Someone could have slipped in." Poirot showed her the hairpin, and her eyes widened. "That design. It's rare from a jeweller in Florence. Only a few own such pieces." She promised to inquire among her circle, but Poirot sensed her fear. The theft was unravelling her world. To broaden his net, Poirot visited the Rialto district, where Enzo's mysterious passenger had disembarked. The quay was a bustle of merchants hawking spices and silks, their voices a cacophony against the canal's lapping. He questioned a fishmonger who'd been there at midnight, a wiry woman with sharp eyes. She remembered a cloaked figure hurrying toward a shuttered warehouse, clutching a small bundle. "Looked nervous," she said, kept glancing back. Poirot located the warehouse, its doors padlocked, but a broken window revealed a glimpse of crates inside, one marked with a faint blue smudge. Sequin dust again. He couldn't enter without a warrant, but the clue confirmed the thief's trail led here. Back at the palazzo, Poirot received a reply from Madame Duval, his Paris perfumer contact. The jasmine scent was a custom blend, Étoile de Minuit, favoured by a select clientele, including a certain Comtesse de la Roque, a French aristocrat known for her love of rare gems. The name wasn't on the guest list, but it sparked a memory of the French diplomat who'd left the ball early. Could he be connected? Poirot's mind churned, weaving the diplomat, the Signora Ignota, and the warehouse into a pattern. As twilight fell, Poirot stood on the palazzo's balcony, the Carnival's masks swirling below like ghosts. The scream, the hairpin, the warehouse, all pointed to a thief who thrived on audacity, leaving clues as if daring Poirot to catch them. But another sound interrupted his thoughts, a soft, deliberate knock at the palazzo's gate. A new note awaited, its script identical to the first. The Sapphire watches, Poirot. Follow the moon. The crescent moon on the hairpin flashed in his mind. The thief was closing in, and the night promised more shadows to chase. Chapter 6. The Moon's Reflection. Hercule Poirot held the second cryptic note in his gloved hand. Its words: The Sapphire watches, Poirot. Follow the moon. Etched in the same elegant script as the first, a taunt that sent a shiver through the evening air on the palazzo's balcony. The crescent moon hung low over Venice, its silvery light dancing on the canal's surface like scattered diamonds, mirroring the hairpin's etched design he'd retrieved from the water. The thief was toying with him, weaving symbols into their game, but Poirot's little grey cells were alight with connections. The jasmine-scented clues, the cloaked figure's escapes, the warehouse near the Rialto, and now this lunar directive. The moon, he pondered, his moustache twitching. It illuminates secrets, but also casts deeper shadows. We must follow its path through this labyrinth. Determined to decipher the message, Poirot descended to the palazzo's library once more, where the guest list and his array of clues lay spread across a grand oak table. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp, its glow pooling over faded maps of Venice pinned to the walls, relics from the Rossi family's merchant past. He cross-referenced the note's phrasing with the Sapphire's legend, recalling the Contessa's tale of the gem's curse tied to lunar phases, a thief drowned under a full moon centuries ago. Was the culprit invoking the myth to heighten fear, or did they harbour a superstitious belief? Poirot's eyes fell on the name Comtesse de la Roque from Madame Duval's telegram, the user of the rare jasmine perfume. A quick mental calculation placed her in Venice's social circles. Perhaps she was the Signora Ignota, the unknown woman in silver, whose presence at the ball remained a ghost in the records. He summoned the Contessa, who arrived in a rustle of silk, her face etched with worry under the lamplight. Monsieur Poirot, another note. This fiend haunts us like a spectre. Poirot showed her the message and the hairpin, explaining the moon's symbolism. Her eyes widened as she examined the hairpin's crescent etching. This jeweller in Florence, I know him well. He crafts pieces for a select few, including my cousin Eleanor, but she's in Rome. Wait, there was a rumour of a French noblewoman who commissioned similar items last year. Together, they pored over society columns clipped from old newspapers stacked in the library's corner, yellowed pages whispering of galas and intrigues. One article mentioned Comtesse de la Roque attending a masked event in Paris, described as an enigmatic beauty with a penchant for rare scents and jewels. She fits, Poirot said, his voice firm. We must locate her in Venice. Leaving the library, Poirot ventured into the night, the Carnival's frenzy enveloping him like a living entity. Masked throngs surged through the cales, their costumes a riot of feathers, beads, and brocade, illuminated by torches that flickered like stars fallen to earth. He made his way to the Rialto Bridge, its arch spanning the Grand Canal, where merchants still hawked wares under strung lanterns. The warehouse he'd spotted earlier loomed nearby, its doors now ajar in the moonlight. a sliver of darkness inviting entry. Poirot hesitated, aware of the risks, but the note's urging propelled him forward. Slipping through the gap, he entered a cavernous space filled with stacked crates, the air thick with dust and the faint echo of dripping water. His cane probed the shadows as he navigated aisles of forgotten cargo. Spices from the East, silks from Milan, and curiously, a crate labeled bijoux anciens, ancient jewels. A soft creak drew his attention to a back room, partitioned by heavy curtains. Parting them cautiously, Poirot discovered a makeshift lair. A table strewn with tools, wire cutters, lockpicks, and a velvet pouch spilling glass beads that mimicked sapphires. On the wall hung a map of Venice, marked with red pins tracing a path from the Contessa's palazzo to this very warehouse, and onward to a quay near the Lido. A discarded cloak lay on the floor, black silk with silver edging, matching the scrap he'd found in the alley. The jasmine scent permeated the air, confirming this as the thief's hideout. But the sapphire was absent. This was a staging ground, not the final cache. Poirot pocketed a small ledger from the table, its pages filled with coded entries, dates, initials, sums that might unlock accomplices. His discovery was interrupted by footsteps outside. Poirot extinguished his pocket torch and hid behind a crate, his breath steady despite the pounding of his heart. Two figures entered, one tall and cloaked, the other shorter, clad in a servant's livery. The cloaked one spoke in a hushed French accent, feminine and refined. The detective sniffs too close. "Deliver the gem to the buyer at dawn, Paolo." Poirot recognized the voice's timbre and the name. Paolo, the nervous footman from the palazzo. The shorter figure nodded, his face briefly illuminated by moonlight. Indeed Paolo, his eyes wide with fear. "But madame, the curse—" "The moon," Paolo whispered. The woman laughed softly. "Superstitions for fools. The sapphire is mine now, and Poirot will chase shadows while we vanish." They departed as swiftly as they'd come, leaving Poirot to emerge from hiding, his mind ablaze. The cloaked woman was likely Comtesse de la Roque, the Signora Ignota, her French accent betraying her origins. Paolo was her inside man, bribed or coerced into aiding the theft. The ledger in his pocket held the key to the buyer's identity, and the map pointed to the Lido as the next move. Poirot slipped out of the warehouse, the moon now higher, casting elongated shadows that seemed to whisper warnings. He hurried back to the palazzo, the Carnival's masks blurring around him, each face a potential enemy. Upon returning, Poirot confronted Paolo in the servants' quarters. The boy caught mid-pack, a small valise at his feet. "You dance with danger, mon jeune ami," Poirot said, blocking the door. Paolo froze, denial dying on his lips as Poirot revealed the ledger and recounted the warehouse meeting. Tears streamed down the boy's face as he confessed. Hired by the Comtesse weeks ago, promised riches to slip her into the ball disguised, and to create a distraction during the waltz for the theft. "She said it was a prank," Paolo sobbed. "But then the notes. The scream was her signal to me." The scream Poirot had heard, a feint to draw attention elsewhere. Poirot secured Paolo in a locked room, alerting the Contessa to summon the authorities discreetly. But the night was young, and the thief remained at large. Deciphering the ledger's codes under the library's lamp, Poirot uncovered initials. H.T. Harlan Thorpe, the American industrialist, or perhaps another. The buyer's meeting at dawn on the Lido loomed, a chance to ensnare the culprits. As the clock ticked toward midnight, Poirot prepared for the chase, the moon's reflection on the canal urging him onward into the deepening carnival of shadows. Chapter 7. The Lido's veil as. The first hints of dawn painted the Venetian sky in strokes of pale rose and gold. Hercule Poirot stood in the shadowed vestibule of the Contessa's palazzo, his overcoat buttoned against the chill mist rising from the Grand Canal. The clock in the Grand Hall had just chimed 4, its resonant tones echoing through the silent corridors like a summons to action. Poirot's mind was a whirlwind of deductions, pieced together from the night's revelations. The Comtesse de la Roque, unmasked as the cloaked thief and the enigmatic Signora Ignota, had orchestrated the Sapphire's theft with Paolo's unwitting aid, and now a buyer awaited at the Lido, the slender barrier island guarding Venice from the Adriatic Sea. The ledger's coded entries, deciphered under the library's flickering lamp, pointed to a dawn exchange at a secluded pavilion near the beach, marked on the warehouse map with a red pin labelled Rendezvous Final. Poirot had alerted the local carabinieri discreetly through a trusted intermediary, ensuring they would shadow his movements without alerting the culprits. "The net tightens," he murmured to himself, adjusting his hat as he stepped into a waiting gondola, its black hull slicing through the water with barely a ripple. The journey to the Lido was a silent voyage through the awakening lagoon, the gondola propelled by Enzo, the scarred head gondolier, who had been briefed on the peril ahead. Mist clung to the surface like a shroud, obscuring distant silhouettes of fishing boats and the faint outlines of islands. Poirot sat rigidly, his cane across his knees, replaying the warehouse conversation in his mind, the Comtesse's mocking laughter, Paolo's fearful whispers about the curse. The boy, now confined under guard in the palazzo's cellar, had spilled more details in his tearful confession. The Comtesse had approached him months ago, posing as a distant relative of the Contessa, promising him a share of the Sapphire's sale to escape his servile life. She'd provided the disguise for the ball, a silver gown and hood that blended seamlessly with the masquerade, and instructed him to tamper with the ballroom's lights during the waltz, creating momentary darkness for the theft. The notes slipped under the gate were her flourishes, designed to unsettle Poirot and add a layer of theatrical dread, invoking the gem's legendary curse to mask her rational greed. As the gondola approached the Lido's shores, the mist began to lift, revealing golden sands fringed by pine groves and the elegant facades of seaside villas, their shutters still closed against the early hour. Enzo guided the craft to a discreet landing near a wooden pier, where Poirot disembarked with a nod of thanks. "Stay hidden, mon ami," he instructed. "If trouble arises, summon the authorities." The Lido at dawn was a world apart from Venice's chaotic carnival, a serene expanse of beach where waves lapped gently, and the air carried the fresh tang of salt and seaweed. Poirot followed a sandy path marked on the map, his shoes sinking slightly into the dunes, leading to the pavilion, an ornate structure of wrought iron and glass, perched like a forgotten jewel amid the trees. It was a relic from grander days, used for summer soirees, now shrouded in solitude. Concealing himself behind a cluster of pines, their needles whispering in the breeze, Poirot waited, his watch ticking inexorably toward the appointed hour. The sky brightened, casting long shadows that danced across the pavilion's steps. Soon, a figure emerged from the opposite path, a woman in a dark travelling cloak, her hood pulled low, moving with the graceful poise of a predator. It was the Comtesse de la Roque, her face partially visible now, high cheekbones, lips painted crimson, eyes like chips of ice scanning the surroundings. She carried a small leather case, no doubt containing the Mask of Eternity. Poirot's pulse quickened. She was early, perhaps anticipating betrayal or pursuit. Moments later, another figure approached from the beach side. A man in a tailored suit, his fedora tilted to shadow his features. As he stepped into the pavilion's light, Poirot recognized him. Harlan Thorpe, the American industrialist from the initial interrogations, his granite jaw set in determination. "You have it?" Thorpe demanded, his voice low and urgent, laced with the brusque accent of New York boardrooms. The Comtesse nodded, opening the case to reveal the sapphire necklace, its central gem catching the dawn's rays in a blaze of blue fire. As promised, she replied, her French inflection smooth as silk. But the price has risen. Poirot is closing in. Double the offer, or I walk. Thorpe's eyes narrowed, his hand dipping into his coat pocket. You think you can extort me? I've waited years for this gem. My collection demands it. The negotiation turned tense, voices rising in hushed arguments about curses and fortunes. Poirot listened intently, piecing together Thorpe's motive. Not mere wealth, but an obsession with cursed artifacts, believing the Sapphire's legend would enhance his private museum's allure. The ledger's HT initials confirmed it. He was the buyer, perhaps even the mastermind who'd hired the Comtesse through intermediaries. Seizing the moment, Poirot stepped from the shadows, his cane raised like a scepter. Bonjour, mes amis, he announced, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. The game ends here, under the watchful eye of the moon's fading light. The Comtesse whirled, her face paling, while Thorpe froze, his hand emerging with a small pistol. Poirot, she hissed, snapping the case shut. You meddle in affairs beyond your grasp. Thorpe aimed the weapon, but Poirot remained unflinching. Shoot if you must, monsieur, but the carabinieri surround us. Your escape is as illusory as the Carnival's masks, chaos erupted. The Comtesse lunged for the path, but Enzo emerged from the dunes, blocking her way with a stout oar. Thorpe fired a warning shot into the air, the crack echoing across the beach, but it summoned the hidden officers, 3 carabinieri in uniform, rifles at the ready, closing in from the trees. Drop the weapon! Their captain barked in Italian. Thorpe hesitated, then complied, the pistol thudding into the sand. The Comtesse, cornered, hurled the case toward the waves, but Poirot darted forward with surprising speed, catching it mid-air. The Sapphire returns to its rightful owner, he declared, opening it to confirm the gem's presence. As the officers handcuffed the pair, Poirot extracted confessions. The Comtesse admitted her role. Driven by debts from a lavish lifestyle, she targeted the Contessa's ball after hearing of the Sapphire through society whispers. Thorpe, her clandestine partner, had provided the plan and funds, his industrial empire funding black market dealings. The jasmine perfume was her signature, the notes a personal touch to savor the thrill. We underestimated you, detective, Thorpe growled, his ambition crumbling. The Comtesse sneered. The curse will claim us all. But Poirot dismissed it with a wave. Curses are for the superstitious. Justice is for the methodical. With the culprits in custody, Poirot returned to Venice by gondola, the Sapphire secure in his pocket. The lagoon sparkled under the rising sun, the Carnival's echoes fading as the city stirred to life. Back at the palazzo, he presented the necklace to a tearful Contessa, her relief palpable. Monsieur Poirot, you've saved more than a gem. You've restored my peace. Yet as he bowed, his grey eyes flickered with lingering questions. Had all accomplices been caught? The ledger hinted at a broader network, shadows yet to be chased in this carnival of deceit. Chapter 8. The Ledger's Hidden Names. The morning sun bathed the Contessa's palazzo in a golden glow as Hercule Poirot sat in the grand library, the sapphire necklace safely restored to its velvet-lined box on the Contessa's desk. The arrest of the Comtesse de la Roque and Harlan Thorpe at the Lido had brought a measure of closure, yet Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with unease. The small leather ledger from the thief's warehouse, its pages dense with coded entries, lay open before him, a puzzle demanding his attention. Its cryptic initials and dates suggested a network beyond the captured duo, a web of conspirators who might still threaten the Sapphire's safety. The curtain has not yet fallen, Poirot murmured, his fingers tracing the inked lines. This carnival conceals more players, and I, Hercule Poirot, must unmask them. He began decoding the ledger with methodical precision, his fountain pen scratching notes on a sheet of vellum. The entries listed transactions, dates, and initials, HT for Harlan Thorpe, clearly the buyer, but others, GL, NP, and a recurring VM, hinted at additional figures. GL could be Giovanni Luca, the Venetian art dealer whose nervous glances during the initial interrogation had caught Poirot's eye. NP might point to Nadia Petrova, the Russian ballerina with the torn sleeve, though her role seemed peripheral. VM was a mystery, absent from the guest list, yet the ledger recorded payments to this figure weeks before the theft, suggesting a planner or financier. Poirot's mind churned. Had the Comtesse and Thorpe been pawns in a larger scheme? Determined to unravel these threads, Poirot requested the Contessa summon Luca and Petrova for further questioning. The salon, with its gilded mirrors and velvet drapes, became his stage once more. Luca arrived first, his wiry frame tense, his velvet coat slightly rumpled as if he'd dressed in haste. "Monsieur Poirot, I know nothing of stolen gems," he insisted, his sharp nose twitching. "I was selling a Tintoretto that night." Poirot held up the ledger, pointing to GL beside a sum of 10,000 lire. "Then explain this, monsieur," he said, his voice like a velvet glove over steel. Luca paled, claiming the payment was for a legitimate art deal, but his fingers drummed nervously on the armrest. Poirot noted the lie in his eyes, a flicker as faint as a candle in a storm. Nadia Petrova entered next, her dancer's grace undiminished despite the early hour. Her emerald eyes met Poirot's with defiance, but the tear in her sleeve, repaired now, reminded him of her presence near the theft. "I danced, I laughed, I saw nothing," she said, her Russian accent clipped. Poirot pressed her about the ledger's NP, and she laughed, a brittle sound. "Many have those initials. I am a performer, not a thief." Yet when he mentioned the jasmine scent, her hand brushed her wrist, where a faint bruise lingered, barely concealed by powder. "A clumsy partner," she repeated, but Poirot's gaze lingered, sensing a deeper truth. Leaving the salon, Poirot sought the Contessa's insight into VM. In her private study, surrounded by portraits of her ancestors, she rifled through correspondence, her hands trembling slightly. VM could be Vittorio Moreno, she suggested, recalling a reclusive Venetian nobleman known for his interest in rare artifacts. Moreno had attended the ball, masked as a plague doctor, his long beak and dark robes a chilling presence. "He's a collector, but secretive," the Contessa said. "He spoke to me briefly, admiring the sapphire before the waltz." Poirot's interest sharpened. A collector with access to the ball could orchestrate a theft from the shadows. To pursue Moreno, Poirot ventured to his palazzo on the quieter Dorsoduro Sestiere, a Gothic edifice with ivy-clad walls overlooking a narrow canal. The butler, an elderly man with a stooped back, admitted Poirot reluctantly, claiming his master was indisposed. The foyer was a museum of curiosities, ancient vases, a jade idol, a sword with a jewelled hilt. Poirot's eyes caught a display case holding a single blue feather, identical to the one from the ballroom floor. "A coincidence, perhaps?" he asked, his tone deceptively mild. The butler stammered, but before he could answer, a voice echoed from the staircase. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you." Vittorio Moreno descended, a tall man in his 60s, his silver hair swept back, his eyes like dark pools under heavy brows. Moreno invited Poirot to a drawing room, its walls lined with rare manuscripts. "I collect beauty, not trouble," he said, offering a glass of grappa, which Poirot declined. The detective produced the ledger, pointing to VM. "Your initials, monsieur, tied to payments before the theft." Moreno's smile was thin. "I fund many ventures, art, charity, even carnival masks. But theft? Absurd!" Yet Poirot noticed a locked cabinet behind him, its glass door reflecting a faint blue glint, as if hiding a gem. He pressed Moreno about the ball, the feather, the jasmine scent, but the nobleman deflected with practiced ease, his charm a polished shield. Leaving the palazzo, Poirot felt the weight of unseen eyes. a sensation that had dogged him since the scream in the night. He returned to the Contessa's, where a new discovery awaited. A servant had found a hidden panel in the ballroom, behind a tapestry, containing a silk glove stained with jasmine oil. The glove was small, feminine, but its stitching bore a monogram, VM. Was Moreno the mastermind, using the Comtesse as a front, or was another VM at play? Poirot's mind raced, connecting the glove to the warehouse, the feather to Moreno's collection, and the ledger to a conspiracy broader than he'd imagined. As dusk fell, the Carnival's revelry surged anew, masks and torches flooding the calles. Poirot stood on the palazzo's balcony, the ledger in hand, its secrets whispering of a final act. The Sapphire was safe, but the network behind its theft remained, and VM was the key. He resolved to confront Moreno again, but first he needed evidence, something to crack the nobleman's facade before the Carnival's shadows closed in for good. Chapter 9. The Masquerade's Endgame. Hercule Poirot stood on the Contessa's balcony as twilight draped Venice in hues of violet and amber. The Carnival's final night, igniting the city with a feverish crescendo. The silk glove with its VM monogram stained with jasmine oil rested in his pocket, a tangible link to the elusive Vittorio Moreno or another figure cloaked in those initials. The ledger's coded entries, the blue feather in Moreno's palazzo, and the hidden panel in the ballroom wove a tapestry of conspiracy that stretched beyond the captured Comtesse de la Roque and Harlan Thorpe. Poirot's grey eyes gleamed with resolve. The thief's network was unravelling, but the mastermind remained at large, and the Sapphire's safety was not yet assured. "The Carnival ends tonight," he whispered to the evening breeze, "and with it, the masks must fall." Determined to confront Moreno, Poirot arranged for the Contessa to host an impromptu gathering, inviting key figures from the ball under the guise of celebrating the Sapphire's return. The guest list was selective: Giovanni Luca, the art dealer, Nadia Petrova, the ballerina, and Vittorio Moreno, the reclusive nobleman, along with a few trusted allies to maintain appearances. The Contessa's ballroom, where the theft had occurred, was transformed once more, its chandeliers aglow, tables laden with crystal flutes of Prosecco and platters of Sicchetti. Masked musicians played a haunting Vivaldi melody, their notes weaving through the air like threads of suspense. Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored tuxedo, moved among the guests, his cane a silent partner in his dance of deduction. The evening began with calculated civility. Luca arrived, his sharp features tense, his eyes darting to the sapphire necklace displayed in a locked glass case at the room's centre, a deliberate bait set by Poirot. "A beautiful piece," Luca remarked, his voice strained. "But cursed, they say." Poirot smiled thinly, noting Luca's lingering gaze on the case. Nadia Petrova swept in, her crimson gown a stark contrast to her earlier restraint, her movements fluid, but her smile brittle. "A lovely evening, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her emerald eyes avoiding his. Moreno entered last, his plague doctor mask discarded for a simple black domino, his silver hair catching the candlelight like a crown. "A bold move, detective," he murmured, shaking Poirot's hand with a grip too firm. To flaunt the gem so soon after its return. Poirot orchestrated the evening like a maestro, guiding conversations to probe for cracks in their facades. He engaged Luca about the black market jewel trade, dropping hints about the ledger's GL entries. Luca deflected, claiming ignorance, but his fingers twisted a gold ring on his left hand, a nervous tick. With Nadia, Poirot mentioned the bruise on her wrist, suggesting it came from a struggle, not a dance. She laughed, a high, forced sound, and changed the subject to the music. Moreno proved the most elusive, his answers polished, his demeanour unshaken even when Poirot referenced the blue feather and jasmine-scented glove. "Many collect feathers," Moreno said, sipping his Prosecco. and jasmine is a common scent in Venice's salons. As the night deepened, Poirot executed his plan. He signaled the Contessa, who announced a toast to the Sapphire's recovery, drawing all eyes to the glass case. At that moment, a servant, pre-instructed by Poirot, dimmed the lights briefly, mimicking the blackout during the original theft. In the flicker of darkness, Poirot watched closely. Lucas stepped toward the case, his hand brushing its lock. Nadia moved to the balcony doors as if poised to flee. Moreno remained still, but his eyes locked on the sapphire, a glint of hunger betraying his calm. When the lights returned, Poirot clapped his hands, drawing attention. "Mes amis," he declared, "the thief's accomplices are among us, and tonight we unmask them." He produced the silk glove, holding it aloft. This, found in a hidden panel, bears the initials VM, Vittorio Moreno perhaps. Moreno's smile didn't waver. "A common monogram, Poirot. You accuse without proof." But Poirot pressed on, revealing the ledger's entries, linking GL to Luca's illicit dealings and NP to a payment Nadia received weeks before the ball. "You, mademoiselle, were paid to distract, to dance near the Contessa during the waltz," he said. Nadia's face flushed, but she remained silent. Luca, cornered, stammered, "I only facilitated introductions, no theft." Poirot turned to Moreno, describing the warehouse map and the feather in his palazzo. "You, monsieur, funded the scheme, did you not? A collector's greed drove you to use the Comtesse as your instrument." The room tensed, guests murmuring, the musicians pausing. Moreno laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You weave a fine tale, Poirot, but I am no criminal." Yet as he spoke, Poirot noticed a faint tremor in his hand, and a servant approached, whispering urgently. A search of Moreno's gondola, authorized by the Carabinieri, had uncovered a hidden compartment containing a vial of jasmine oil and a forged invitation to the ball, marked Signora Ignota. The evidence was damning. Moreno's composure cracked, his voice rising. "You cannot prove intent," but Poirot's calm was unshakable. "The little grey cells, they see through masks. You orchestrated the theft, using Thorpe's wealth and the Comtesse's skill to claim the sapphire for your collection." The Carabinieri, waiting in the wings, stepped forward, arresting Moreno, Luca and Nadia, who collapsed in tears, admitting her minor role in exchange for leniency. The sapphire remained secure, its case untouched, but Poirot's triumph was tempered. The ledger hinted at one final name, CR, unaccounted for, a shadow still lurking. As the guests dispersed, the Carnival's final fireworks lit the sky, their bursts reflecting on the canal like shattered stars. Poirot stood alone, the glove in his hand, sensing the mystery's final act awaited, hidden in the fading echoes of the masquerade. Chapter 10. The Final Unmasking. The Venetian night pulsed with the fading heartbeat of the Carnival, its final fireworks fading into wisps of smoke above the Grand Canal. Hercule Poirot stood in the Contessa's grand ballroom, the sapphire necklace gleaming in its glass case under the chandelier's golden light, a beacon of triumph, yet a silent witness to lingering secrets. The arrests of Vittorio Moreno, Giovanni Luca, and Nadia Petrova had unraveled the core of the theft's conspiracy, but the ledger's final initial, CR, gnawed at Poirot's mind like an unresolved chord. The Comtesse de La Roque and Harlan Thorpe were in custody, Moreno's role as the mastermind confirmed. Yet CR suggested one last player in this carnival of shadows. Poirot's grey eyes scanned the emptying room, his moustache twitching with the certainty that the truth awaited its final bow. "The masquerade ends," he murmured, "but the stage holds one more act." The Contessa, her face a mix of relief and exhaustion, joined him, her silk gown whispering as she approached. "Monsieur Poirot, you've saved my family's honor, but why do you look so troubled?" He showed her the ledger, pointing to CR beside a payment dated the night before the ball. "This figure, madame, remains unmasked. They were part of the scheme. Perhaps the silent partner who ensured its execution. The Contessa frowned, her memory straining. "Sire, I know no one by those initials among my circle." Poirot nodded, his mind racing through the clues. The jasmine-scented glove, the blue feather, the warehouse map, the forged invitation, and now this elusive name. He requested her permission to search the Palazzo's records for any overlooked connection, sensing the answer lay within these walls. In the library, Poirot pored over guest lists, servant rosters, and old correspondence, the lamplight casting long shadows across the oak table. A dusty ledger from the Contessa's late husband caught his eye, detailing household expenses from years past. Among the entries was a payment to Clara Rossi, a distant cousin hired as a seamstress for the Palazzo's costumes. Clara Rossi, initials CR, had been dismissed after suspicions of pilfering, vanishing from Venice a decade ago. Poirot's pulse quickened. The Contessa confirmed Clara's existence, describing her as a bitter woman with a talent for mimicry and disguise. "She resented my wealth," the Contessa admitted, "but I never imagined she'd return." Poirot's deductions crystallized. Clara Rossi, the forgotten cousin, had resurfaced as the architect of the theft, using her knowledge of the Palazzo to orchestrate the heist. The Comtesse de la Roque was her front, a hired thief with a flair for drama, while Moreno provided the funding, and Luca the black market connections. Nadia's role was minor, a distraction, and Thorpe the eager buyer. Clara, as CR, had remained in the shadows, her resentment fueling a decade-long plan to steal the sapphire and humiliate the Contessa. The jasmine scent, the forged invitation as Signora Ignota, and the monogrammed glove were her signatures, a personal vendetta woven into the crime. To confirm his theory, Poirot enlisted the Carabinieri to track Clara's movements. A tip from a gondolier led them to a dilapidated boarding house near the Arsenale, where a woman matching Clara's description had been seen. Poirot, accompanied by 2 officers, arrived at dawn, the mist curling around the sagging building like a shroud. The landlady, a grizzled woman chewing tobacco, admitted a tenant named Carla had rented a room under an assumed name. Poirot ascended the creaking stairs, his cane tapping softly, and entered a cramped attic. There, amidst piles of costume sketches and vials of jasmine oil, sat Clara Rossi, a woman in her 40s, her once fine features hardened by years of bitterness. Her hair was dyed black, but her eyes, sharp and vengeful, betrayed her identity. "Clara Rossi," Poirot said, his voice steady. "Your masquerade is over." She laughed, a harsh sound, clutching a sketch of the sapphire necklace. "You're too late, Poirot. The gem was my revenge, and even if I failed, I've shaken her world," she confessed, her voice dripping with venom. After her dismissal, she'd spent years in Paris, honing her skills in disguise and forgery, befriending the Comtesse de la Roque in society circles. Learning of the sapphire's display at the ball, she devised the theft, using Moreno's greed and Luca's contacts to fund it. The notes to Poirot were her taunts, a way to revel in her cleverness. "The curse was my story," she sneered, "to scare them all." The Carabinieri arrested Clara, her defiance crumbling as they led her away. Poirot returned to the Palazzo, where the Contessa awaited, tears in her eyes as he recounted Clara's betrayal. "My own blood," she whispered, "driven by envy." Poirot placed the sapphire's case before her, its gem untouched. "Madame, the curse is but a tale. Your strength has prevailed." He revealed every detail: Clara's planning, the Comtesse's execution, Moreno's funding, Luca's logistics, Nadia's distraction, and Thorpe's obsession. Each clue, the feather, the glove, the sequin, the notes, had pointed to Clara's vendetta, her jasmine scent a thread tying the conspiracy together. As the Carnival's final bells tolled, Poirot stood on the balcony, Venice settling into a quiet dawn. The sapphire was safe, the conspirators unmasked, and justice served through the relentless work of his little grey cells. "The Carnival of Shadows ends," he said, gazing at the canal's shimmering surface, "and order is restored." To the audience watching this tale unfold, he offered a final note. If this mystery captivated you, take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support means the world to us, bringing more tales of intrigue to light. Now grab a cup of tea and let the next adventure begin.